Well, hello, YouTube subscribers and those of you that stumble across this page. What do you think of the last 2 months? Hasn't it been amazing? I mean, we live in an amazing time, don't we? A lot has happened since my last video. I mean, we had a vote. The Adventist Church had a vote on women's ordination. Well, we have an Adventist running to become president of the United States. We have an economic and social collapse looming, the likes of which this country has never seen. We have we have refugees, something like 19 million plus refugees fleeing across Europe right now. And we had the Pope speak to Congress. Just amazing. Absolutely amazing. You know, this is something that would never happen 50 years ago in this country. Of course not. We were still anti Catholic back then. But here he came and spoke to Congress. Well, there, there's a lot to talk about. But I just want to cover two things today, or the video will be way too long. One is the vote on women's ordination, and the other is uh, an Adventist running presidency. Okay, so there is a vote on women's ordination. The historic conservative Adventists won, right? They got a no vote, and so now there'll be a great big church revival, and all the bad people will leave, and there'll be harmony, and everyone can sit around and sing "Kumbaya." You know, I don't say that to be mean, but this is how a lot of people are acting. They're acting like this vote went the way God wanted it to go, and so that means God's still in charge. But I'm here to tell you there was no vote taken on women's ordination. That's right. Let me say it again. There was no vote on women's ordination. After months of hoopla and all the sermons for and against, they didn't even take a vote on whether women should be ordained or not. So I'm not sure what all the celebration is about. What they voted on was whether divisions should be allowed to make their own decisions. It was nothing more than a vote for unity. It had nothing to do with trying to do what was biblical or right. Like after the vote, Wilson even asked the division presidents to clarify the meaning of the vote. He wanted them to state it back in their words so that everyone was very sure what this vote was actually about and what it was not about. Okay? And this is what NAD President Jackson said. These are his words. Okay? He said, the vote prohibited the 13 world divisions of the church or any other entities from making their own decisions regarding the consideration and potential implementation of women's ordination to the gospel ministry. Now he continues, and they wanted to make these next points very clear. He continued, it is important that we identify what the motion did not do. It did not disallow women from serving as commissioned church pastors. It did not disallow women to serve as ordained elders in the local church. It did not disallow the ordination of deaconesses. Now, explain to me again how this was a win. I have something to admit here. See, I never realized ordaining women as elders, that ordaining women elders was an official policy of the church. Here I've been in church for 30 years, and I never knew this was official policy. But because of this whole issue, I discovered it. And I first heard Doug mention something about it, and I wondered, well, what's Doug Batchelor? What's he talking about? And so I did a search throughout because of this issue, and I discovered this that in the 1989 General Conference annual council vote. Now this is not like the vote that was just taken down in Texas. This is just an annual council vote where you have a small group of men get together, from my understanding. kind of like an executive committee or something. They got together and they decided this. Those who have, without regard to gender, been recognized as commissioned ministers or licensed ministers may perform essentially the ministerial functions of an ordained minister of the gospel in the churches to which they are assigned, subject to division authorization of this provision if the following conditions apply. The individual has completed approved ministerial training. The individual has been called by a conference to serve in a full-time pastoral evangelistic ministerial role. The individual has been selected and ordained as a local church elder. Now, this was 1989, and in order for these women to be a commissioned minister, they had to have been ordained as a local church elder. So, this is the first thing I found, which implies they had been ordaining women as church elders prior to this time. Now, I had heard about some churches had women elders, and I thought they were just the left liberal fringe, the very new theology churches that did this. I didn't realize it was an official policy. As I did more study, I found out that apparently in the 70s, a small group of men from the General Conference decided women can be ordained as church elders. So now, is it me, or is there something very strange here? I mean, what is the difference between an ordained elder and an ordained pastor? And what's the difference between a commissioned pastor or ordained pastor? Is it just a little less salary? Is that it? So you see, they didn't actually take a vote on women's ordination because they decided a long time ago that women can be ordained as elders and then be commissioned as pastors. All they did was decide whether each division should do their own thing. The conference didn't want that. The conference wants you to do whatever they say. So all of this hoopla was for nothing as far as I can tell. Now I looked to see if there were any responses out there from people like Bachelor, Bohr, Veith, or any of the others who were talking about this issue at length beforehand, and see if maybe they were talking about afterwards and say, well, look, we got the no vote on the divisions doing their own thing, but we didn't get the vote on actually whether or not women should be ordained as pastors and elders. But I don't see anyone saying any of this. It's strangely silent out there once again. But for those of you that weren't there, that haven't read it, that don't know how the actual motion read, here it is. I will read to you the actual motion as it was printed and given to these delegates and what they voted on. Here it is. It says, request to the 2015 General Conference session. Whereas the unity for which Jesus prayed is vitally important to the witness of Seventh-day Adventist Church, and whereas the Seventh-day Adventist Church seeks to engage every member in its worldwide mission to make disciples of Jesus Christ among people from every nation, culture, and ethnicity, and whereas various groups supported by a general conference and its divisions have carefully studied the Bible and the Ellen G. White writings with respect to the ordination of women, and have not arrived at consensus as to whether ministerial ordination for women is unilaterally affirmed or denied, and whereas the Seventh-day Adventist Church affirms that God has ordained that the representatives of his church from all parts of the earth, when assembled in a general conference session, shall have authority. Of course, they say that here, but then they went and passed these other things back in the 70s and 80s without bringing it to a general conference session. I wonder why, huh? Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked here. So back to this motion. It continues. Therefore, the General Conference Executive Committee request delegates in their sacred responsibility to God at the 2015 General Conference session to respond to the following question. After your prayerful study on ordination from the Bible, the writings of Ellen G. White, and the reports of the Study Commission, and after your careful consideration of what is best for the church in the fulfillment of its mission, is it acceptable for division executive committees, as they may deem it appropriate in their territories, to make provision for the ordination of women to the gospel ministry? Yes or no? So you see, there's no vote. Is it appropriate for women to be ordained as ministers? It was just, should we make provision for the ordination of women to the gospel ministry in each separate territory? That's all this vote was about. I'm sorry, but this was no win for anything other than uh, trying to keep unity in the church. This was no vote on women's ordination. There was no vote for any biblical matter. It was simply a vote over unity in error. And unity in error is doomed to fail. That's all I want to mention on women's ordination. Well, at the beginning of this, I said I was also going to make a video about Ben Carson running for president, but it became so long I decided to cut this one here, make a separate video uh, just for Ben Carson, which you'll find on my web channel. Hopefully I can figure out how to put a link right here for it and one in the box down below.